have a question. Can a person be owned by someone the way a cow or a horse is owned? I'm sure you don't think so, but people who used to have slaves thought so. Like a cow or a horse, a slave had to work for the person who owned him. And like a cow or a horse, a slave could be sold. We don't have slaves in this country now, but at one time there was a lot of slavery. Most of the slaves were black and worked in the South on big farms called plantations. The farms in the northern part of our country were small, and the farmers did not need extra help. Most of the northern states made laws against owning slaves. The blacks who lived in the North were free. Even in the South there were free blacks. Some slaves were freed by their masters. Others ran away to be free. Our story today is about a slave who ran away. The story of Harriet Tubman. Harriet could not fall asleep. Underneath the blanket, the dirt floor was hard. Oh, but she was used to that. Her brothers were talking, but she was used to that, too. It was their words that were keeping her awake. Terrible, scary words.
They say the master has no more money.
That's why so many of our people are gone. He sells the slaves to get money, or he sends them away to work for other plantation owners.
Who will be next? One of us?
Shush! You'll scare the little ones.
Harriet whispered in the dark.
Please, Lord, don't let the master send my brothers and sisters away. Please, Lord.
The next day, the air was warm, the sun was golden. Oh, it was too nice a day to worry. But Harriet thought of the words she had heard in the dark. Who will be next? One of us? That same morning, a woman, Miss Susan, came to see the plantation master.
I want a gal to take care of my baby. I can only pay you a few pennies a week for her.
I have just the gal for you. She's only 7, but she can do the job.
Miss Susan's wagon took Harriet farther and farther away from the plantation. Harriet wondered how her family would feel when they learned that she had been sent away. There had been no time to say goodbye. Harriet found out right away what work she had to do. Miss Susan told her to dust and sweep. Harriet knew how to sweep. Oh, she'd often swept the dirt floor of her own cabin. But she did not know how to dust. She'd never learned, for there was no fine furniture in a slave's cabin. Miss Susan whipped Harriet for not knowing the right way to dust. Every day Harriet cleaned the house and ran errands. Every night Harriet rocked the baby. Harriet had to make sure that the baby did not wake up and cry. The baby slept in a cradle near Miss Susan's bed. Above the bed was a shelf where Miss Susan kept a whip. If the baby woke up and began to cry, Miss Susan reached for the whip. Harriet was whipped so often she had scars on her neck for the rest of her life. One day, Harriet ran away, but she did not know how to get home. Oh, years later, she told what happened.
One morning, Miss Susan had the baby. I was standing by the table waiting till I was to take it. Now, near me was a bowl full of sugar lumps. I never had anything good, and that sugar right by me did look so nice, and my mistress' back was turned to me, so I just reached out to the bowl to take one lump, and she turned and saw me. The next minute she had that whip down. I gave one jump out the door. I ran and ran. By and by I came to a great pig pen. I tumbled over the fence and fell on the ground, and there I stayed from Friday till the next Tuesday, fighting with those little pigs for the potato peelings. By Tuesday I was so starved I knew I had to go back to my mistress. I didn't have nowhere else to go, even though I knew what was coming.
By now, Harriet was very weak and couldn't do much work. So Miss Susan took her back to her master and told him she hadn't been worth 6 pennies. Harriet was growing up. By the time she was 11 years old, she was very strong. She worked from sunrise to sunset in the fields. She worked as hard as a man. Oh, but she was happier than she had ever been. She loved being out of doors. Out of doors, she felt almost free. Free. Harriet thought of freedom all the time. At night, many slaves came to Harriet's cabin. They talked in whispers. They sang softly of the states up north and of a land called Canada. Men could be free up north, they said. One night, Harriet asked,
How do you get there?
By Underground Railroad.
Is there really a train that runs up under the ground?
No, we call it underground because it's a secret. There are special secret roads and paths that lead north. There are people who hide runaway slaves and help them on their way. They are called station masters. Their houses are called stations.
Harriet listened. Her eyes had a faraway look.
The Underground Railroad has conductors, too. The conductors are people who come secretly to the South. They lead groups of slaves to freedom. They lead them north, always following the North Star.
From the door of her cabin, Harriet could see the bright star shining like a beam of hope in the night sky. Follow the North Star to freedom. Oh, someday she would. One evening, when Harriet was 13, she was working in a field, and nearby stood the overseer. It was his job to see that the slaves did their work well. Oh, if they didn't, he used the long whip he always carried. While she worked, Harriet kept looking at one of the slaves. Something was wrong. He wasn't doing much work. Suddenly, he began to run across the cornfield. The overseer shouted at him to come back, but the slave kept running, and the overseer ran after him. Oh, Harriet knew there would be trouble. She followed the men to the village store. The overseer wanted to whip the slave right there in the store. He saw Harriet, and he told her to hold the slave while he tied him up and whipped him. But Harriet shook her head no. At that moment, the slave ran out the door. Quickly, Harriet stood in the doorway to stop the overseer from running after him. The overseer picked up a heavy iron weight. He threw it at the slave. But the iron struck Harriet's head instead. For months, Harriet's family did not know whether she would live or die. When Harriet was well enough to work again, she was sent to a new master, a builder. The builder could hardly believe what he saw. Harriet was shorter than most women. Oh, but she was stronger than most men. She cut more wood in a day than any other slave. Well, the builder was not the only one to admire Harriet's strength. Workers in the field looked at her in wonder. One of them was John Tubman. He was a black, but he was not a slave like the others. His mother and father had been freed by their master before John was born, so he had never been a slave. When he worked, he was paid for the job, and he was allowed to keep all the money he made. Harriet had never known a man like John, tall and laughing and free. Soon after they met, they were married. Oh, now Harriet was happy, except for one thing. More than ever, she wanted to live in freedom. Surely, she thought, John would want her to be free too. She began to make plans for them to run away. She told the plans to John, but he laughed at her. He said he didn't want to hear her foolish talk about running away. Harriet did not understand. John was free. Didn't he want his wife to be free too? At night, she looked up at the sky, at the bright North Star that would guide her to freedom. And finally, she knew that she would have to go on without John. Well, one day Harriet learned that she was going to be sold and sent farther south to a cotton plantation. Ho, this was the time to try to escape. She remembered the name of a white woman who had once promised to help her. The woman's home was a station on the Underground Railroad. Harriet decided not to wait another day. Harriet could not say goodbye to anyone, not even her mother and father. An escape had to be secret. So that evening she walked past the slave cabins and she sang,
When that old chariot comes, I'm gonna leave you. I'm bound for the promised land. Friends, I'm gonna leave you.
Later, after she was gone, her friends and family thought about that song, and they knew that it had been Harriet's goodbye message. They knew that the promised land was the North. All that night, Harriet walked through the woods. She was tired and frightened and hungry. Was she being followed? She listened for the pounding of horses, but the only pounding she heard was her own frightened heart. She listened for the barking of the slave catcher's dogs, but she heard only the blowing leaves. At last, Harriet found the house of the woman who had promised to help her. The woman invited her in and gave her some food, and then she told Harriet how to find the next station on the Underground Railroad. At last, Harriet was traveling north to freedom. By day, Harriet hid. By night, she moved north. One night, she traveled in the bottom of a farmer's wagon under a pile of corn. One night, she crossed a river in a rowboat. It was so dark she could not see the man who rowed the boat. After days and nights of walking and hiding, she finally reached the state of Pennsylvania. Now she was safe. Nobody could make her go back. No one in Pennsylvania was allowed to own slaves. Harriet looked down at her hands to see if she was the same person now that she was free. She felt like she was in heaven. Oh, right then and there, Harriet made a promise to herself.
I'm free. My brothers and my sisters and my folks should be free. I'll make a home in the North, and with the Lord helping me, I'll bring 'em all here.
And Harriet kept her promise. Time and time again, she traveled the Underground Railroad to bring more than 300 slaves to freedom. The rest of this book tells about those exciting adventures. It's called Runaway Slave, and it was written by Anne McGovern. I hope maybe you'll finish the book to learn more about Harriet's life. And when you come back to the attic, we'll learn more about America's past. Goodbye.
The preceding program was made possible by a grant from the Ohio Department of Education.